Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a few stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, my friend Carmen here just might have some cookies for you in the near future. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from MMW Oxford. Prepaid envelopes can be very expensive. So this happened over 30 years ago when I was 16 in the 1980s. In those days, there were adverts in the press for a record club. This is actual physical albums, where you could get some albums free by signing up, and then get sent 3 a month after that, which you had to pay for by a money order within 30 days or get charged interest. So I used it for a few months and it was okay. But then there was less and less good choices, and I wanted to cancel the subscription. Each month I got the albums, I could return them in prepaid plastic envelopes, but for the first few months, I kept the albums, so had a load of spare prepaid envelopes, important for later. When the quality of albums went down, I just sent them back, but this was becoming a nuisance since it was getting close to when I was due to go to college and move away from home. I contacted the company to cancel the subscription, but that's when they nuked me by saying that I'd agreed to a 36-month rolling contract from each agreed purchase. Waiting 3 years to get rid of this was not an option because I'd need to return every month to my parents to return the albums. I told them I was moving away. They were not interested, thinking they had me, and they did. They told me to send anything back I did not need each month and pay for what I kept, and they would start the ending of my contract from when I stopped buying albums. I made it clear I had stopped. Cue the malicious compliance. I thought about all the things I did not need that I could send them apart from the garbage albums I was being sent each month. My dad did building work on the side of his main job, so we had hardcore and cement in abundance at the back of the house. So I got one of the first plastic prepaid envelopes and filled it with hardcore and wet cement, waiting for it to set. It was almost too heavy for me to carry to the post office, but I got it there. The company had to pay by weight for whatever was in the envelope, so it would have cost a lot. I phoned them 2 weeks after that. I mentioned I had quite a few envelopes, and they wisely decided to cancel my account immediately. If it looks too good to be true, then it is. I learned that at 17. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Dioscurry. It says, "Your trick works well with any group that sends you unsolicited, return postage guaranteed envelopes. Pro tip, you don't need to make it fit inside the envelope. You only need the envelope attached so the address can be read. I found tape works well for this. The post is legally required to send it, and the addressee is legally required to pay for it. You'd be surprised what sort of interesting objects and garbage one can effectively attach one of those labels to. I suggest you experiment." Another commenter down below called George is the coolest said, "That's awesome. Did the post office people raise any eyebrows at sending a literal brick in the post?" OP responded and said, "They marked it as very heavy, but because it was a gray plastic bag, they could not tell what it was. I just said it was returns." Alright, so according to my demographics, most of you guys who are watching this right now are over 35 years old. And at the beginning here, OP had to explain what Columbia House was. I all of a sudden feel really, really old at 42. Also, can someone tell me how to attach one of those labels to a rabid raccoon? This story comes to us from No Cartographer 8435. What professor asks for, professor gets. I had a hand in this malicious compliance, and it was rather nice. First, a little information. Back when I was working as a classroom technician for my local community college after I graduated, the college had a need for a technical scribe for a blind student. They needed someone who could not only provide direction of what the computer was showing on the screen, that the Dragon software that audibly gave cues on what you were doing, was unable to, but also had the technical skills to also know how to work the software that was being used. I fit in perfectly, and so was hired on to do the technical interpreting for the student for the quarter. The professor assigned for the students to create a user interface that did some specific things. Well, the paper that he gave out had a general idea of what the students were to create. To help, but not overly help, I designed the general GUI, graphical user interface, and then let the student do the brunt of the work that Dragon functioned for, and I filled in the gaps by verbally cueing him on where he was and what to do next, because Dragon wasn't giving any cues. Student then turned in the assignment. Professor asks us to come to his office the next day and says that he knows I did the GUI part and it was the student's responsibility to do their own interpretation of what he handed out. I was about to explain, but the student grabbed my arm, politely apologized and said he will do as asked. We leave his office and I ask, "What's up?" He replied, "Can you edit the settings on those laser printers in the computer lab to print a page of nothing but black?" I said, "Sure." So we do so, and after that black page was printed out, we went back to the professor's office. He said, "Well, that was quick." The student handed over the paper, and the professor was very confused. Student then spoke up. "You said for me to design a GUI based off of what you printed. This is what I saw, so I am giving you my interpretation of the image that you printed for the class." At that moment, the professor had a light bulb go off in his head, realizing that he required a blind student to give their interpretation of an image he printed for the class. He apologized, said the previous work will be counted, and for future assignments to proceed as we had been. He then said to the student, "Well played." So in this case, you could say the professor was blindsided by the student. I mean, it's a good thing that the student wasn't in a blind rage. And yes, it was definitely well played. You could even say it was visionary. I love how the student was the blind one in this case, but the professor definitely didn't see that coming. This story comes to us from Unique User. Want me to take a message? Sure. I work in claims, and because we're long-term personal injury claims, we're not considered a call center, but we do take calls from our claimants and need to be available to take calls from claimants. And on average, I receive about 6 to 8 calls a day, but generally, only 4 of those are for me. Recently, there has been a trend of some colleagues putting themselves on unavailable for long periods of time, 3+ hours daily, to avoid calls, and when you reach out to ask if they're free for a call, they don't respond until it's been at least 5 minutes, because in that time, you've probably ended the call for them anyway. I'd taken a call for a colleague named Sally already, and in a department of 100+ colleagues, 2 calls for 1 person is unusual. When I received another call, but this time it was from an external complaints body wanting to ask Sally some questions, which at that stage was not yet a complaint. At 2:32, I message Sally to ask if she's free, and while I wait, I get the background from the nice external complaints person. At 2:42, she replied and said, "Sorry, I was just on a call, everything okay?" And I immediately replied saying, "No, they're still on the call, and I can transfer you." Sally immediately backtracks and says, "Sorry, I'm still on the call, can you take a message?" What Sally doesn't know is that I can see her status, and it's set to Do Not Disturb and not on a call. So I know she's just trying to get out of taking calls. But I just agreed, and I decided instead of resolving the call, I would take a message and pass it on. As requested, I took a message from the nice external complaints person. As I wasn't able to resolve the query, I confirmed that I would escalate it urgently to Sally's manager and our internal complaints team, as they wanted to know about an urgent payment that hadn't been processed in a week. Sally immediately replied and said I should have said who it was and she'd have taken the call. That's so odd. I thought she was on a call. OP added a quick little edit at the bottom. It says, "Also, before anyone asks, either way, the payment will be processed today, so me taking the message didn't screw anyone other than Sally over." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Gypsy Danger TMC. It says, "God, I hate people like this. Well done, OP." OP responded and said, "Same. I normally would have just approved the payment and gotten it pushed through, but after they lied to me about being on the call, I thought, screw it, laugh out loud." Another commenter down below called NotRasta8913 said, "This trend should definitely be reported to your manager. I get trying to be a bit lazy, but knowingly shifting your work to colleagues is really crappy behavior. OP responded to this one and said, yeah, I know that my team gets a disproportionately high level of calls for other teams in comparison to calls for ourselves. So our manager is looking into it to see if we just don't get as many calls and to work out why we're getting other calls, so they are looking into it. In the meantime, I do what I can to help with easy calls, and I think I'll be taking more messages in the meantime, haha. As long as you don't get in any trouble for doing exactly what Sally told you to do, then I see no problem here. Sally will get written up for call avoidance at some point, and hopefully other people that are slacking in that office will get written up as well. It's sad when most of the work falls on just a small group of people, but unfortunately when people realize they can get away with that, it just keeps on going on. This story comes to us from A Trucker's Thoughts. Wanna discipline me for being right? I got you. I work for a freight delivery company, drive a semi-truck, and usually go out with 10 to 15 deliveries a day. Our policy is that when you deliver to a residence, you have to take a picture with the work phone as an additional proof of delivery. That has morphed into now, if the delivery receipt says residential, you have to take a picture of it regardless if it's going to a business or a house. There are so many small details on a delivery receipt that can get missed, so this is an important detail. One day last week, I have a delivery for Laura Lopez, name changed. It was being delivered to a construction company that Laura is an employee of. The delivery receipt does not say it's residential. I make the delivery and leave, no picture. Next morning, my B of a supervisor says, I have a write-up for you. Puzzled, I ask her for what. For the Laura Lopez delivery yesterday, it was residential. I explained to her that it was at a business and the delivery receipt did not say residential. She wasn't having it. I should also mention that her and I butt heads often, and she's been trying to get rid of me for some time. I told her that we need to go talk to my manager about it, so we do, and he sides with me because she has no ground to stand on. This infuriates her. I tell her that under no circumstances will this be an issue again. That day is when I start my malicious compliance. I take pictures with the work phone at every stop. What happens is, when I hit depart on the work phone, it sends a pop-up to her computer with the picture, and she has to acknowledge it before she can do anything else on her computer. I crashed her computer 3 times that day. At one stop, I took 20 pictures. I get a call from her telling me that I have to stop taking pictures. I politely tell her that I'm covering my butt and not going against policy. I'm giving you an order. I laugh and hang up. Sure as crap, she wrote me up for it. I don't even argue. I say, we need to take it to my manager. I walk in and he says, what now? I tell him the story, he looks at her, takes the write-up and rips it up. Are you seriously writing him up for overperforming? She had no words, and I still take a picture at every stop because I'm petty. Laugh out loud. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Kuraboy1. It says, there are about 25 truck drivers in the world right now and about 10 million jobs. I'd be out the door before that B had finished filling out my name on the write-up. OP responded and said, yeah, I hear you, but I'm well paid and love the company. She's a minor setback. Another commenter down below called Dragon Fire Kitten said, does everyone's work phone send the photos to her station? Can you get others to follow in your example and have it be like, oh, I heard OP got written up over not taking photos, so I'm also now taking photos at every stop. OP responded to this one and said, so I've started somewhat of a coup. I know of at least 2 other drivers doing it. Does anybody else think that the manager is now keeping like a paper trail on that supervisor, just looking for a reason to get rid of them as soon as possible? OP, you really need to get all of the other drivers doing this picture thing to get her extremely PO'd so that she does something else that's stupid and the manager can fire her on the spot. Come on, OP, you know you want to. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. Manager asks me to motivate an employee into doing a job he doesn't like. This happened around mid-2006. I was a low-level team leader in a tech consulting company. I was in charge of 2 teams of 3 each. The client was a bank. If you've ever worked with a bank, you know that technology moves pretty slowly in a bank. For instance, the project we worked at was in Java 1.3 that got deprecated in March of '06. One of the guys in my team, let's call him Max Powers, was the kind of guy that's always trying to be on the cutting edge of everything, and we had him working on the project, and he asked several times to migrate the project to a newer version of Java, or be assigned to a project with more up-to-date tech. He just was assigned to this one. But I couldn't do any of those things. I knew he was unmotivated because of this, and I was also pretty bummed about having to work with outdated technology. So we both started researching open source tools to use in the company that were cutting edge, and proposed some improvements to our manager. He liked the idea, so he formed a task force to create tools for the company. The task force was Max and myself. However, this was a side job. Our main responsibilities were still on the bank project. One day, on a team, project leaders and managers meeting, we were talking about desired and undesired rotation, people leaving the company, and how to stop it. I brought Max's case up, saying that we have someone extremely focused on cutting-edge tech, doing boring, outdated stuff, was probably the recipe to undesired rotation. The manager said, "You're wrong, this is totally desired rotation. We want people motivated to work here, he's not." I said, "But he's not because you're unwilling to move him to a project with better tech. Plus, he's one of our best assets by a mile. He's doing the work of 2 to 3 people and the task force. We wouldn't want him to leave, it would be a problem." The manager said, "Then it's your fault, you have to motivate him better." I stopped arguing. To me, Max leaving was totally a case of undesired rotation. It was a problem to my planning, and furthermore, it was losing someone whom I saw as one of the top assets available in the company. But the manager said that I needed to motivate Max better. Cue Malicious Compliance. So I did. I motivated him to get the heck out of the company. He wasn't going to be allowed to work in cutting-edge projects there. He found a new and exciting job in no time. He's a millionaire now. He got called by Google to interview with them. He rejected the offer. He could have been retired by age 38, but he kept on working because he still loves what he does. We struggled to cover him and had to hire 2 more devs, and the task force came to an end. I couldn't do it just by myself, and the rest of the devs weren't as interested in it. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called It Be a Zombie Yo. It says, "Always good to see people lending a helping hand, especially when it's helping a knife into the back of a crappy former employer." Another commenter down below called Y Particle said, "One of my favorite quitting as malicious compliance variants I've seen on here. Nicely done. I was half expecting your motivation to be to pay him the salary of the 2 to 3 people that he was worth. But I doubt that's something you could have done unilaterally." OP responded and said the company had salary steps. He might have moved 1 to 2K above others, and that's it. Huge respect to OP in this case for helping their colleague do what was best for them. I'm actually kind of surprised that OP didn't follow them out the door with their own undesired rotation. OP did mention in another comment though that this was in their first year of working there and they stayed there for 10 years. Wow.